So at this point, I think that's it. We also have money in there for electric and roof, an extra 10,000 for each of those. The roof we may be able to push off, and the electric might end up getting rolled into the water upgrade. So those, but we have them there just because the operator had mentioned that we might want to keep something in there for those. Okay? Any other questions about water?
Nope.
Okay. Great. Kirk Crossing Sewer, move on to that. So as we've discussed on many occasions, we are running in the negative in this account. For 2023, we have pushed out some projects that we had hoped to do in 2023. Painting the EQ tank, we're gonna push that out to 2024. And here's the sand filter topic. So in our tertiary treatment at the sewer plant, our sand filter is a little too small to handle the effluent when we have big events, so storms and that sort of thing. We have not had a violation, so we're still, okay, but it's the sort of thing that needs to be taken care of.
Okay.
Two options. One is we talked to Dutch Land, and they can make a larger sand filter that's specially designed to fit in where our existing sand filter is, and it would give us about 50% more surface area. Or there's an alternative called a drum filter, which is a more effective filter, but it's $165,000 instead of $65,000. So we did go, Rick and Matt and I went down to a plant in Chester County and took a look at their filter down there. And we're gonna talk to their operator, just to kind of try to get a sense of, there are some other advantages to it. So it's a better filter, it's more effective. And, we don't know if DEP is gonna change its effluent laws in the future and that sort of thing that might, come back on us. Also, the backwashing process is, they require less backwashing, so a lot less water goes through there and then has to go back into the tanks and be retreated. So there are some advantages to the drum filter, so we're still kind of looking into that, and we'll try to get some pros and cons and that sort of thing for you guys. One thing that sort of came up when we were visiting the other plant is there's also, this other plant has, at the beginning of the treatment process, what's called a solid separator, which we don't have.
Really?
No. We have 2 grinder pumps in our EQ tank that's just grinding
Yeah.
away, and they wear themselves out every few years because they're not designed for that.
Right.
Right. So that's a big investment though, but there's the potential of a lot of savings from that investment. So what I've asked Spot Stevens and McCoy to do is give me a proposal for doing an assessment of our sewer plant so that we can go from beginning to end and look at all of our components and what's going on, how are we treating things, and is there a better way that we could be doing it that might cost an investment up front, but save all of our equipment down the line long-term, right? Because we went back, Kate and I went back and looked at our receipts, and every 5 years we're replacing those grinder pumps.
Yeah.
Yeah, because they just can't handle that much work. But if we separated out all the solids up front.
Well, with everybody, the stuff that people are dumping down now.
Yeah,
It's crazy.
sure. So I've asked Spot Stevens and McCoy to get us that proposal, because I think that would really be helpful, going back to the idea of long-term planning, right?
Yeah.
And the fact that Penvest, has this low interest, loan program. It might be worth it for us to do some bigger investments to save over time, right? Instead of waiting until there's a major failure and
Yeah.
then we're spending a bunch of money in an emergency. So I'll keep you posted on that. At this point, In the budget, I think we have the lower price sand filter, but we're gonna hold off on the research and everything before we bring that back to you guys, okay?
Okay.
So that's kind of where we are. That sort of leads us to, kind of our discussion probably of, rate adjustments for Kirk Crossing, which is towards the back of all these tabs.
The fee increase.
Thank you, Steve.
Thanks, Steve.
We're really boring them. All right, so I think the first spreadsheet you have there is the water analysis. So we have 3 scenarios that we put together. The first one for water is an increase of the flat fee of $2 a month and a $2 increase per 1,000 gallons for consumption. So the way that Linda broke it down here, actually, Linda, why don't you wanna just explain it? Don't want you to fall asleep, I'll let you talk it through.
Okay, so we went through, and I started out with what we had budgeted, and kind of went forward from there and just increased that incrementally each year, so that there was a 5% increase in that each year, so you could see the shortfall we were gonna have. Then we took into account the water project engineering, the 100,000, because that's obviously something that has to be paid out in order for the water project to go forward. And then we calculated the increase in the rate from that based on that increase for $2 flat rate, and then $2 increase in the consumption. And we had used, I'm trying to remember the total gallons, increased flat fee 2 plus additional 2, that took us to 7.25 per 1,000 gallons.
Actually, that should have been 8.25, because right now,
We increased it.
yeah, right now it's 6.25, so a $2 per 1,000 gallon increase would take it up to 8.25, yeah. Which is worked into the spreadsheet, yeah. And you can see there, the debt payback is based on borrowing 1.5 million. So that's kind of worst case scenario. And the assumption is, we really wouldn't start paying it back until 2025. We figure a year from now for all the design, go out to bid, and it's probably gonna start construction in 2025, most likely. So we wouldn't have to start paying it back till that year at the earliest.
And that was based on 1.5 for the first 2 years, and then 2.5 after, right?
Right, so Penvest, the way their rates are set up, the first 2 years, it's a lower rate, and then it bumps up to the 2.5%. And that's for 20 years. All right, so basically kind of the bottom, the increase / decrease in fund balance, that kind of shows you how, in 2024, because of that big expenditure for engineering, or for design, we're gonna be slightly in the negative, go positive for a year, and then be slightly, running in the negative with that amount of increase. 2026 is 10,000, and it kind of creeps up from there. Now, one thing that this doesn't really take into account is the fact that we have the fund balance of, $400,000 to $500,000 that can either be used to pay off that shortfall, or it could be used to reduce the loan. We can kind of structure things. So even though it's showing that it's in the negative, we have kind of ways to offset that, I guess I would say. Whether or not that lasts 20 years is a different story.
And it still comes down to different, we end up getting a grant, $1 million grant for it too.
Correct.
So, there's a lot of factors that goes into this.
But what we're trying to do is show you worst case scenario
Yeah.
with different combinations of flat fee and, you know, rate increases.
This is all based on the premise that you're not getting a grant.
Correct.
Right,
Yeah.
Correct. Which is the approach we have to take at this point.
right, that's, I understand that.
Sure.
But I
So,
still go back to the $500,000 that's sitting there too, that, you know, so. It's not like we're gonna be completely negative and have to
Exactly.
borrow it from another fund.
exactly,
It,
Right.
you know, the water fund can support
mhm.
this.
Mhm.
For how long? I don't know, but
Right, so there's the
Right.
big, you know, $100 question, right? Because I think for interest in water, like right now, we're projecting $33,000 of interest that we're gonna make in 2024. Well, that covers our shortfall without having to tap into
the
our
reserve.
fund balance,
Yes.
right? So, but we don't know that that's gonna last real long.
And as you spend the money, your interest is gonna go down.
Correct, exactly. So, but, I mean, you know, if we have $500,000 in there, divide that by 20 years, let's say, where does that?
Brings up the question about the sewer fund.
Right, yeah. So, you know, we're also gonna have to tap into some of that money to cover sewer, right? So, so it gets a little, you know, you can kind of go a bunch of different directions. Like, we have these negative numbers, and we know that there are ways that we can cover them at least for several years, but we also don't wanna deplete
Right,
our reserve fund completely
Exactly.
either. So, so the $2 a month increase plus the $2 increase per 1,000 gallons, you know, that starts to put us in a pretty good position. But the reality is it would probably have to be revisited in maybe 5 or 10 years or something like
or
that.
maybe not at all.
Or maybe not at all, correct?
Go both ways, okay?
Yeah, but again, we're trying to
Well,
be the
yeah.
pessimists in the
And
room.
I understand that.
From the conversation we had last month, wasn't the, part of the issue is that we haven't increased the rates for
In 10+ years.
Yeah.
10+ years.
Correct, that's right.
So,
Yeah. And for water, it's been okay. For sewer, it
Right.
hasn't been okay.
So you have to look at it both ways. We're gonna hit them with a water and a sewer increase.
So the question is,
So
Do
how
you-
deep do you want to dig into their pockets?
correct. And do you want to just do it all at once, or do you want to spread it out, right? Like, that's
We
the other.
we have to do something for sewer. I mean, it's just,
Well, that's-
this
That's,
is just.
absolutely. I think we all agree that we don't have a choice.
We don't.
We absolutely don't have a choice for sewer. For water, could you push it off a year or two? You could. And maybe that's a possibility, while we wait to see what we get from the grant. But then, in 2 years, it's possible we're gonna have to do an increase for water.
right, and correct me if I'm wrong, but one of the scenarios, did we talk about having like a graduated increase over the years to like look at this and like maybe say like, okay, like, here it's, you know, $4 and four flat $1 increase for like the first 3 years, and then the next 3 years, it's a different, you know, you factor in these different increases. I don't know if we can do that.
So we didn't, because, yeah, I mean, we could, right? But who knows what's gonna happen in those 3 or 5 years,
Mhm.
right? It's gonna be a different set of people, there could be other issues, so it's hard to say, okay, we're gonna increase it this now and.
Well, look, I mean, part of what we're talking about here is the rates haven't kept up from what I'm
Correct.
hearing, right?
Right.
So if we
On the
went
sewer
back,
side.
On the,
Right.
water
on the
side,
sewer
that'd be
side,
fine.
right,
so if we went back 10 years ago and made graduated increases, we wouldn't be hitting people with,
Well, we did 10 years ago, well, actually, longer than that, when they did the sewer upgrade.
okay,
When they did the plan upgrade and took out the $1 million loan,
right,
that's in your bill,
right.
you know, to pay back that loan. And that loan should have been paid off by now, but somehow got refinanced and screwed up and
I don't know, though, I think we
it's
we
longer
looked
than
into
15
that.
years.
What's
It's
that?
already no longer than 15 years from the time they did the
Oh.
upgrade.
I think it's 20, yeah.
It was only a 15-year loan,
Okay. All right, well then maybe that's it.
so at some point they refinanced it and,
Yeah, they did. They did refinance it and they got a much better rate. But maybe they extended it.
They did,
Yeah, okay.
So, I guess what I'm saying is even though they did that 10 years ago, in the interim years,
right,
if instead of waiting until now to look at this and have to,
you could have done a small increment
yeah,
increase.
like
where you're
$1
not-
every year or something like
Yes.
that, we would have been,
It would have helped.
yeah.
Yes.
Now, one thing I will say is, the reason in this first scenario that we changed it to a $2 a month flat fee and $2 increase in consumption is because for every dollar of flat fee increase, we get about another, $3,000 to $4,000 a year of revenue. For every dollar of increase in consumption, we get about $13,000 of revenue. So more of our revenue comes from the consumption piece. But the thing that I think, the reason why I think we should do a combination is because the consumption piece of it, people have a little more control over, right? They can choose to be a little more efficient with their water usage and maybe offset some of that increase. Instead of just a flat fee, because then it's a hit. So that's kind of why we chose to give you a scenario with a combination of the two. So, I guess at this point, we could wait to start increasing water fees, if you guys thought that would help at all. I kind of lean toward going ahead and doing some sort of increase in combination with the sewer increase, just so that it's kind of a one-time hit, and then we're not like continually hitting people along the way. But I think an argument can be made either way, so it's really, kind of up to you guys. The first scenario actually, with the $2 a month flat fee and the $2 increase in consumption, actually generates more revenue than the next scenario of a $4 a month flat fee and a $1 increase in consumption. Just to kind of give you a comparison there.
Okay.
Okay, all right, at the bottom, you have your average cost per year. You have it for the $4 scenario and the $8 scenario. Is the top one supposed to be for the $2 scenario? Or,
No, I don't know that you
I
actually
did update
factored that one in. We could do another one with that. We added this kind of
And that's-
later, this
that's-
first scenario, so it's not in that bottom comparison.
if I look at that right, that's per year more than the average.
So their average cost per year for water is $427 with,
Oh, okay, so
With
it's not an increase of, all right.
no,
Thank you.
no, it's just the differential increase.
I was hoping, but I had to check.
You're hoping what?
Better-
So 75 roughly, $73.
Yeah, so it's roughly
for $4.
$75 for the $4 scenario. So
Yeah, over 12 months.
12 months.
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sure. So that's kind of some of the scenarios. I don't know if you guys want to give us some preliminary thoughts that you have on.
Not until we go through sewer.
Okay, fine. Let's jump to sewer then.
Well, I have a question with the 400,000 that you generate 33,000 a year interest off of, right? So,
Yeah.
and you wanted to use that for the project,
The interest that we make?
the 400,000, or something for that?
It's available. Whether or not we want to apply it to this project, we'll have to decide. But I guess we would lean toward not applying it to the project because we're making more money off of that money in interest
Yes.
than we would be paying on the 1.5. So essentially, right now, the interest we're making off of that covers a third of the cost of the loan payment.
Yeah.
Now, again, it's not, that interest isn't gonna last forever, but
It could get better. It could get worse. You gotta go both ways, but
It could go either way.
Yes.
Or it could stay the same.
I think it's about correct.
So
So
anyway,
survivability of the interest coming off of that $400,000, have you plotted that out? If we just made payments or use the money without touching the 400,000 and use that against this?
the interest that we make. Well, I mean, in the first scenario, it essentially kind of easily covers our shortfall for the first 7 or 8 years of our loan. So, I mean, it would get factored into that, it's part of the budget for that, for the water fund, so it would help to offset it for sure.
So for 7 or 8 years, you're not depleting potential capital that you could use for an emergency. You still have
Correct.
400,000 roughly, whatever that
Exactly.
number is there, and still pay that off.
That's right.
And potentially there's some type of income, grant, whatever.
Yeah,
And there's 5, 6 years to find for the 7th or 8th year.
yeah, but once we get to that point, and that's assuming that the interest rates stay
Stay the
kind of
same.
where they are, right? But once we get to that point, if they start dropping off, and then we start coming up short on our payments, then we're gonna have to start digging into that 400,000, then we're making less interest because we have less invested, so it's kind of a, and then at that point, we're gonna be sitting here having a conversation as to whether or not we need to up the rates again.
Right.
But it
But
would,
that would be 7, 8 years down the road.
it
It's,
would,
it's not next year,
yeah,
so.
that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which, most probably, I mean, you gotta look at rates every year. I mean, if you don't have to raise them, you don't have to raise them, but,
Right, right, yeah.
and I'm not saying that in 3 years, we don't have to raise the rates. We could have to. Who knows?
Yeah, that's true. Although with water, I mean, I think this gives us a pretty good sense of kind of where it stands. So, I mean, I feel like with these numbers, if we were to raise it, the $2 and the $2, I think we're definitely good for several years. And then it's a matter of, whether or not the board at that point in time wants to start tapping into the reserves to avoid another rate increase, or do the rate increase to preserve the reserves, right? So that would be the decision that would have to be made at that point in time. I mean, would you agree with that?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, so I guess what I would ask is if there's any way that we can project this out so that we're factoring in maintenance costs of these systems, right? And how, and to get us to a spot where the amount that we're charging for these rates lines up.
Right, with covering all of our debt and adding to our reserve.
Right. Because eventually you're gonna have to replace the equipment that's in there, but,
Right.
I think that was part of the thing that you had asked them, you wanted to try and get a proposal on, right? So that we could look forward and see.
Kind of what needs to be
Right.
done over time. Yeah, but I think it's a good point. And, off the cuff, we probably would like to be growing the reserve for the water